So it seems 2024 is the year of the lightweight e-bike, and that almost every brand is releasing a lightweight category of electric mountain bike. And it's awesome to see the category develop, because every brand has got their own interpretation of how a lightweight e-bike should look and how it should ride. And by the way, I just want to show you how far e-bike design has progressed just over the past few years. The pace has been pretty incredible. And if you compare it to some other industries, and some things you've no doubt seen over the years. So as an example of how things have progressed, let's look at the iPhone from 2017. And here's today's iPhone. Definitely a lot of differences under the hood, but visually very close. I mean, they look virtually identical. Some minor differences for sure. Here's a Porsche GTS from 2017. A beautiful piece of engineering and design. And here's today's Porsche 911 GTS. It's still a beautiful piece of engineering and design, with some subtle differences, but that being said, aesthetically, it looks quite similar. And here's Scott's e-bike from 2017. And yes, this is only going back 6 or 7 years, but how much has changed? This bike had a 140 fork, a whopping 130mm of rear wheel travel, and won the best e-bike in that year. So how much has changed over those years? It's fair to say we've come a long way, because here's Scott's brand new Voltage. And the first thing you might notice is, where's the rear shock? Well, it's definitely got one, but it's completely hidden away inside the frame, and I'll show you how they do this a bit later in the video. Now, the bike's got 155mm of rear wheel travel in this kind of wild, futuristic, super clean and minimalist design. Now, TQ make one of the smallest and most discreet e-bike systems on the market. I've got this one right here, and this little motor puts out 50 Nm of torque and up to 300 watts of power. Now, these motors have got such a small footprint, and it's only 1.8 kilos. And it seems that the bikes that use this are able to package the bikes in such a way, and the rear suspension design and these kind of cool features. And they make these incredibly interesting and well engineered and well executed bikes. And I think a lot of that is down to the size of this motor system. They're not as constrained when they're using these little motor packages. I've ridden quite a few TQ e-bikes, and in my experience, it's the most discreet, silent and stealthy systems that I've ridden so far. It's definitely not the most powerful, but in terms of the sheer integration, design, application, and just how quiet and natural it is, it ticks a lot of those boxes. The battery on the bike is a 360 watt-hour internal battery, meaning it's not designed to be removed. So here's one here. It's a pretty small, fairly lightweight battery, and it does save a bit of weight having it completely fixed in there. And I think that Scott have also kept it non-removable due to the way that the shock's mounted in the frame. There's probably not enough space to accomplish a fully removable battery with the integrated shock. That being said, I do see quite a few people query non-removable batteries and ask what happens if the battery goes faulty. Well, it's something that a dealer can easily fix. So the batteries technically do come out, but it's not really supposed to be done by the end user. It just takes a bit of bolt removal and sometimes dropping the motor out. So the battery is fixed in the frame, but you can add a 160 watt-hour range extender onto the bike if you need more range. So running with the range extender will add another 1.2 kilos to the bike, but you'll then have a total capacity of 520 watt-hours. And crucially, you still have space for a water bottle for the longer rides. One trend that I am noticing with the lightweight segment is to keep the weight in check. We're seeing slightly lower travel, usually in the region of 140 to 150 of rear wheel travel, and then the bikes get spec'd with slightly lighter weight components. For example, most lightweights are spec'd with a Fox 36 instead of a 38, a lighter weight shock and tyres, etc. You get it, it all makes sense, and all of these grams add up. And like I mentioned, to keep it a lightweight feeling with the lower powered motors, they really need to be under 20 kilos. Otherwise, a full powered bike can be had for only a few kilos more. And the lightweights are now falling into 4 kind of e-bike systems. Bosch's SX, the Fazua, Specialized's Male system, or this TQ system like the Scott Voltage. And by the way, I'll have a group test across all these different motor systems, so if you want to be the first to see that stuff, make sure you subscribe. So some key stats about this bike here. Firstly, to exist in the super light category, it should be well under 20 kilos, and the voltage range starts at 17.9 kilos. That's for the absolute lightest and top spec, most expensive model, but the bike I have here is the tuned model. And believe it or not, it's not the highest end, but it's priced at £10,000, which is still in the really high-end price bracket. But this has a more burly build, more in line with a harder trail and enduro type ride. So factory 36 160, a Fox Float X shock, with a piggyback reservoir inside, SRAM's wireless GX Axis transmission and code 4-piston brakes. And this one here, in large, weighs exactly 19 kilos. So how exactly have Scott designed this rear suspension? Well, it's a vertically mounted shock and it's been placed in front of the motor. And it looks like, to me, it's far enough away not to suffer from any heat buildup from the motor. It looks like there's some kind of heat sink in front of it. And there's a small hatch underneath the bike that allows access to the shock dials like the compression and rebound adjusters. There's also a neat sag marker shown on the outside of the bike, so it's pretty straightforward to set up the shock to 30% sag without any awkward tape measures inside of the frame. So you do have to turn the bike upside down to access the shock's compression and rebound controls, but in reality this is usually something that I do when I'm setting the bike up on the first couple of rides, and I then usually leave them all alone once I've found my ideal settings. Although I have to confess, I dropped the little valve cap that's on the shock in the frame when I was trying to screw it back on after I'd pumped up the shock, and it's still in the frame. I tried to rattle it out, but it didn't come out. I didn't give it that long, so I'll figure out a way of getting it out, but it's something that I've never had to do before. Once the shock's set up, it does sit inside the frame working away, and it's all protected from debris and the elements, which is no doubt something that will prolong the performance. I also asked Scott about the possibility to change this stock Fox Float X shock to something else, like, I don't know, an Öhlins or Rock shocks, and whilst they said technically it is possible, they really didn't recommend it. And the reason is likely to do with the tech that Scott have worked with Fox on. And it's pretty cool, actually. The bike has got Scott's TrackLock Suspension system, which is a new kind of system. It's not a twin lock, which controlled the fork and the shock, although that does exist on some of the other models. This is just the shock that it's controlling. Now, it's got a remote on the handlebar and it's got a few different settings. It reduces the air volume in the shock to give different handling characteristics and geometry characteristics. And it depends on the kind of terrain you're riding. And there's 3 modes that you can activate from the bar lever. First, it's fully open, which is the descend mode. This gives access to the full 155mm of travel and the least compression damping for the most, like, I guess, technically demanding terrain. So smashing it down the trails through all the rocks, and the bike's free to move through all the travel. If you flick the lever into the second mode, it's called ramp control mode, and one chamber of the shock is actually closed off, and that increases progression on the shock. And Scott say this is similar to adding like a volume spacer. And it might be great to change into that mode on like fast kind of ripper type tracks, fast bike parks, techie, flowy single track. It's going to add a little bit more compression damping to that shock. And then finally, there's a third mode, which is a climb mode, and that closes off the compression damping altogether. And it also alters the dynamic bike geometry slightly, which is, I guess, kind of ideal for like longer climbs. The idea is that it tightens up the bike to allow it to climb more efficiently. Now, usually on full power bikes, I'm not really into changing suspension characteristics, but on the lower power models, I'm totally into the idea. Although I do think that the clean aesthetics of the bike are somewhat diminished with the lock levers. They do kind of stick out a little bit, and they're quite close to the mode controller. I do have no doubt that this will all become electronic sooner rather than later and offer much cleaner integration. The other voltage models in the lineup actually take it one step further and even link up the fork as well. So it can control the fork, shock, and the dynamic frame geometry. But this model here is just connected to the rear shock. And I do like the Grip 2 damper on the Fox factory, so I'm glad that they've kind of left that as it is. So it's got 155 of rear wheel travel, 160mm fork, and it's full 29er. It's got an adjustable headset cup, so you can run it from a pretty slack head angle at 63 63.9 degrees, or you can jump up in like half-degree increments, so 64.5 and finally 65 degrees. And the reach is pretty long, so if you're tall, it goes up to 513mm in size XL. And 455mm chainstays, and actually that's my preference, a longer chainstay, and it's good to see that, especially on the bigger size. Although it's not size specific, so every bike gets the same 455mm chainstay length. Now something we're seeing more and more is integrated bars and stems, and this bike has got a beautifully crafted single piece bar and stem. They do look excellent, and no doubt if the fit is good for you, it'll be perfect. That being said, I'm 6'3", 191 centimeters, and the rise on it is only either 15mm or 25mm. They do 2 bars, and it's a fixed stem. And personally, I'm a serial tinkerer with like bar height and stem length, and I find it a balancing act between the reach, the feel of the bike at the front, and getting it to feel just right. And although I'm yet to try this, I'd be really surprised if it fit me out of the box. The good news is that you can run your own combo of bar and stem here, so just like any other bike, you're free to put on whatever you like. You just need a little Across top cap that allows you to do that. So there you have it. Scott's lightweight, aggressive trail bike is a stealthy, futuristic looking e-bike. I like the design. The Geo on paper looks in line with what I like to ride. It's pretty aggressive and modern, so watch your space. More on this bike coming real soon, so subscribe if you want to see it. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more e-bike content, and I'll catch you soon.